Morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be looking at identity verification in pensions, and we're hosting this today in partnership with our expert partners, Lexis, Nexis Risk Solutions. So I'm Chris Connelly, and hopefully if this goes well, I'm the person you'll hear the least from, because I'm hosting today's webinar. I'm a board director at PASA. I'm also the Chief Strategy Officer at Hayward. But before we dive in, just a few bits of housekeeping for today. We've automatically turned off your mics and your cameras. What you are welcome to do, though, and we very much want you to raise your own questions. You can use the chat feature on the panel to raise your questions, and I'll try and pick up as many of those as we can towards the end. But to get started, as many of you will already know, that we've actually released guidance from the team regarding identity management and assurance. The guidance response really to the growing complexities and risks that we face as things evolve over time. It outlines best practices for the administrators. It's nicely laid out, thinking about the different types of transactions you do as administrators and what to think about in terms of identity. And it helps provide good practice for administrators to strengthen fraud prevention, enhance the member protection, future-proofing processes, etc. If you haven't had a chance to read that guidance yet, what we will do is we'll post a link in the chat later, but it's also available on both PASA's website and Lexis Nexis Risk Solutions website, and you can go through that. But with the release of that guidance, we just wanted to bring together some of the key contributors from the team to talk about what's important, what it means for pensions industry. And we'll also hear from these experts on here how they're helping schemes implement those practices on the ground. So with no further ado, please can I welcome our guest today. So firstly, we have Lorraine Salmond, who's Head of Identity Strategy for UK and Ireland at Lexis Nexis Risk Solutions. And she's also chairing our PASA Identity Management Working Group. So morning, Lorraine.
Good morning.
And also, thank you. And also Gillian Baker, who's also working in that PASA working group. And she's Financial Risk Management Lead at Hymans Robertson.
Morning, everyone.
Right, thanks very much. So Lorraine, if we can start off, please. Could you just give us a little introduction to what Lexis Risk Solutions does and what your role is there, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, thank you for being here today, and for everyone joining the webinar. It's really a great privilege to be able to talk through this. So as Chris says, I'm Lorraine Salmond. I head up the identity strategy within UK and Ireland for Lexis Nexis Risk Solutions. So in my role, I'm focused on forming and driving our business strategy for identity verification and authentication. And this is as part of our overall business aim to make it easier for society to interact safely, inclusively, and transparently. And at Lexis Nexis Risk Solutions, we use the power of data and advanced analytics to help our business customers make better, timelier risk decisions. So as an example of the volume of data we're looking at, so we're custodians in the UK of 2.85 billion UK consumer data points, and you will quickly spot that there aren't 2.85 billion people in the UK, but that's exactly the problem. There's so much duplicate and so much inaccurate customer data out there, which is a huge headache for businesses and organizations like yourselves. So in terms of, yeah, that's me, that's my role.
Thanks, Lorraine. Gillian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with Hymans Robertson?
Yeah, no problem, Chris. Hi again, everyone. Nice to be here and speaking to you today. So as Chris mentioned, my role is Financial Risk Management Lead at Hymans Robertson, and that's within our third-party administration business unit. So Hymans Robertson is a professional services firm that offer lots of different services across the whole pensions arena, and the administration business unit is one aspect of that. So I'm effectively a risk manager within the business unit, but I have got a specific focus on fraud, identity verification, scams. I also look after data protection for the business unit and also aspects of cyber security. So it's a really interesting role. I love being part of the working group and being able to share insights of what we're seeing at Hymans with our wider working group. And it's great being here today to be able to talk through the guidance with you that we've painstakingly developed over the past couple of months. So yeah, thank you, Chris. That was all I wanted to say to begin with.
Lovely, thanks. Well, let's get into the guidance itself then. But before we get into some of these sometimes quite technical words, Lorraine, do you want to just give us a little bit of background about what we mean by identity management?
Yeah, sure. There are a lot of acronyms and a lot of jargon flying around. So I think it's quite good actually just to step back for a moment and talk about what actually makes up an identity. So if you think of an identity as being a combination of physical, digital, and behavioral attributes or characteristics that belong to a person. So a physical attribute could be things like a name, a date of birth, an address, and often these are kind of data checks that you can do to check those physical attributes. And then digital attributes center around mainly online activities such as email, telephone, or IP address. And then when you look at behavioral attributes, that could be looking at how a person or an individual interacts, say, with a device, a mobile phone or a laptop, etc. But the fix is that a single attribute on its own isn't usually enough to distinguish one person from another, but a combination of attributes might be. And businesses have got to be really confident that they know who they're dealing with, and importantly, whether that individual is likely to pose a risk to their business. So you can see that checking the identity of a customer or a prospect initially when you start working with them or any business starts working with them is critical, but then also rechecking throughout the customer journey and all the really important interactions is also critical as well.
So, so with those basics in mind, then, why are we treating this as such a hot topic right now? I'll pick that up, Lorraine.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of what's driving kind of stricter identity checks, certainly in the pensions industry, there's an increasing rise in pension scams. So the FCA and Action Fraud have been consistently warning of an increase in pension scams where fraudsters are posing as legitimate financial advisors or pension providers to trick individuals into transferring their savings. These losses can be really devastating and can be large sums of money per victim as well. There's also an increase in impersonation and synthetic identity fraud, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But this is where criminals are using stolen or fake identities to perhaps access dormant pension pots, submit fraudulent transfer requests, or hijack accounts. And the shift to digital channels, which certainly has increased post-COVID, has made fraud easier to perpetrate because of those digital channels. And just to explain what I mean by a fake identity or a synthetic identity, this is a really growing side. And this is really where a fictitious identity is created by often combining real and fake information. But the thing is, there isn't actually an individual behind that identity. Fraudsters are using stolen ID documents, manipulating ID documents, and creating completely fake ID documents. And with the AI tools that are out there now, they can generate these fake documents with really realistic attributes. Other types of fraud as well are targeting vulnerable retirees. So fraudsters are increasingly targeting older adults, people nearing retirement age, exploiting a combination of urgency, unfamiliarity with digital services, and financial anxiety. So this is all pushing towards the need for greater identity verification.
Very good. So turning to you, Gillian, with your administration experience, what are the challenges that your clients are facing?
Yes, I'm just going to take it a wee bit of a step back, Chris, because obviously Lorraine's been talking about some of the detail already. So yeah, we know fraudsters are constantly evolving, and therefore so must administrators' defences against that fraud. And obviously our clients and trustees, they want to know that we are prepared for fraud occurring. And I'd just like to remind the audience of some of the statistics from the report that pension scams alone in between 2020 and 2022 lost cost victims 26.4 million. So that's a huge, phenomenal sum. But also in 2023, there were 559 reports of pension fraud, totaling 17.7 million. So you can see there that our clients are worrying about an average loss of about £47,000 per individual. So that's one of the challenges, is how do we prevent against that type of loss. So the risk of identity fraud itself is definitely increasing, and it's partly due to large volumes of personal data becoming available, probably through the likes of cyber attacks or data breaches. We all saw recently about, for example, Marks and Spencer's. Personal data being lost there can be used, in the wrong way by fraudsters and potentially hit our pensions market. And actually, pension schemes and the pensions market are prime targets for fraudsters for a couple of reasons. And again, this worries our clients and the trustees. We hold large amounts of personal data and sometimes sensitive data as well. And for a criminal to get their hands on that and use it, in a criminal manner, there's a huge risk there. We also have huge value assets within pensions, and also we perform a lot of high value transactions. So it's a prime target for fraudsters. Another challenge for our clients and the trustees is the regulator's general code. Now, it focuses on cybersecurity quite a bit, but there's also a big focus on administration within there. And the administration includes the controls that we've got in place to protect members from losing their pension funds. So as I've touched on already, and I probably will a couple of times, if there's a cyber breach and there's a potential risk of loss of member data, then huge impact there for our industry. Also, in talking to our clients and administrators, clients and trustees, I have heard our clients say that administration is the bedrock of pensions, and actually it's all about the data. And I think that's one of the challenges I'll touch on several times in my updates throughout the session today, that the solutions we are proposing that you consider to do your identity verification checks does rely on accurate data underneath. And that's got to be a key challenge for clients and trustees as well in today's world.
Thank you. No, very good practical points there. For those of you listening into the webinar, and I hope there are lots of you out there, please don't forget to put your questions into the chat and we'll pick them up later on. But if I can just turn to the guidance itself, now we've got a bit of background on the nature of the challenge and why the guidance was needed. In the guidance, and you've both contributed greatly to that along with the rest of the working group, when you see the guidance, for those of you who will go straight to that document and start reading it, you'll see the full list of all of the team that helped provide that. So you've played key roles in shaping this document. Maybe we can sort of bring together from those recommendations that you've put in that very great document. Can you walk us through the main objectives you were trying to achieve first, Lorraine?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. So the guidance itself focuses on the interactions through the pensions life cycle that are likely to pose the most risk. So we've focused on the kind of the high risk activities, and it highlights identity and assurance practices to counter those risks. Obviously, the guidance isn't statutory. It doesn't seek to override guidance issued by any regulatory bodies. It's voluntary, and it seeks to explore the existing and also the emerging risks within the industry and how those might be mitigated. So we've kept the guidance specifically broad in nature, so that schemes should ensure that their administrators review and align with it with their own internal processes and controls. And I'd like to thank the wider team in the working group. So it was very much a group effort to come up with the guidance. And I think Gillian, I think you probably can talk about some other further key insights in the guidance as well.
Yep. So I'll just kick off with that aspect, Chris, if that's okay. So yeah, I did read the guidance again, with my administrator hat on rather than maybe a contributor to the document. And I've got a few key takeaways that I wanted to share today. So the first thing that does hit you when you open up the document is there are a lot of definitions in there and a lot of terminology. We've also got a glossary at the end. So it can be quite off-putting maybe when you first open it up and there's loads of words you may be not aware of. So I just wanted to summarise quickly what some of those definitions are asking you to consider. and that is how best do you want to verify your members, especially when you're settling benefits. But also, what ways do you want your members to be able to verify themselves online that you're also comfortable with? And what level of assurance do you want across your whole verification journey? And that's what we're trying to share with you in the guidance. So don't be bamboozled by all the definitions. It's basically there to guide you through the aspects of your IDV processes. And just to reiterate, the key events that we talked about in the document were member data changes, transfers out, retirement process, and also bereavement. And actually, if you read each of those sections of the guidance, for me, I felt there was 3 common themes that came out. Accuracy of data, which is, I think, going to be my buzzword of the session today. But yes, your data needs to be fit for purpose. Overseas members as well, we talk about quite a lot and what the intricacies are of verifying those individuals. And then we touch on vulnerable customers. So just quickly on those 3 areas. Accuracy of data, and I just want to give a simple example of a change of address process. It should be so easy for a member to phone up, advise us of our address, we update our systems, one and done. But actually, if you haven't spoken to that member, that individual, in say 10 years, you want to make sure it is the right individual, that the address is genuine, that's not someone pretending to be that individual. So just having that accurate data of an up-to-date address actually feeds into your whole verification process. And I think that's something we should be taking away, is that the simple data changes can sometimes be complex. Overseas members, I mean, this is a minefield in itself. How do you find your overseas members? How do you locate them if they haven't been in touch for years? Then how do you verify them when you do find them? Then you've got the risk of fake documents being provided to identify them. And then a small thing, but if they've got a PO box address over in, say, South Africa because they don't trust the postal system, how do you verify that address? So the overseas members, I think, is a particular aspect for consideration in your identity verification. Certainly more challenging. I doubt if any firm has got experts in this side of identity verification, so maybe you need to consider that specifically. But also throughout the different events that we talk about in the guide, I do think the solutions that we refer to are common as well. So you've got the biometrics, which Lorraine touched on. We've got multi-factor authentication is another solution that we refer to in the guidance. And also we talk about self-service a lot. But I feel that one of the key takeaways as well is we do consider a layered approach in the guidance. So it's not just, biometrics on its own. What do you do to supplement that? And it could be some credit reference agency checks behind the scenes, for example, at the same time that your member is doing their biometric checks. The multi-factor authentication is something you have, something you know, something you are. So again, that sounds as if it's quite secure, but as I'll touch on later on, there's actually ways around that as well. But then members want to do a lot themselves. They don't want to be on the phone or sending letters or whatever. So they want a self-service portal. Now that needs to be secure, but again, the layered approach needs to be considered. Your member might use username and password to log in, but we want to make sure it's definitely that individual. So we might send a one-time password or one-time code to their registered mobile phone. So again, it's that layered approach. So these are some of the key takeaways, I think, from the guidance. But I'm going to say it again, it's all underpinned by your data. And one of the things we do call it several times in the guidance is to consider your tracing and screening processes. So thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Gillian. As somebody who's been accused of that guy who bangs on about data for 20 years, I'm very glad that someone else talks about it for a while. Thank you. Lorraine, so who was this guidance written for? Who should be using it, and how would you like them to go about using it?
Yes, so it's quite broad as well. So certainly pension scheme trustees and governance bodies. So why would they be using it? So ultimately, they're responsible for ensuring the security and the integrity of a pension scheme member data. So this guidance assists them in assessing the risks, setting internal controls, and ensuring that the really proper identity verification checks are part of the scheme operations, especially when processing transfers or benefit claims. Also, TPAs, third-party administrators, and an in-house admin team. So again, administrators are directly responsible for handling identity verification during onboarding transfers and claims. So the guidance helps outline standardized risk-based approaches for identity verification, including different digital options and ultimately to reduce fraud and delays. Also, identity service providers. So the acronym for that is IDSP. So why? So more and more pension schemes are turning to digital identity verification, and identity service providers have got technology specific for identity verification. And the identity service providers and the providers of that technology need to align with the industry expectations and the regulatory frameworks as well. So again, the guidance provides clarity on what pension schemes expect from identity services, and especially there's new regulations as part of the data use and access bill that has just recently got royal assent, which houses within it the digital identity and attributes trust framework. So that is a UK government trust framework on how to check an identity. So it's very important to make sure when looking at technology providers for identity verification that you're working with a certified provider. Then also legal and compliance teams. So they've got to ensure that identity verification policies comply with the regulations such as GDPR, anti-money laundering regulations, etc., and the FCA rules. So again, it's really the guidance clarifies the regulatory kind of intersections and provides templates for policy and risk assessments relating to identity verification. Then also software providers, platforms and vendors. So providers of pension administration systems and digital engagement tools must integrate securely the different identity checking workflows. So again, this guidance encourages the alignment of those industry good practices, enabling a smoother digital transformation.
Yeah. So if we think about implementation and challenges around that, Gillian, how can schemes balance a robust identity verification process with a smooth or a sort of a secure member experience?
Yep, and I think where Lorraine just touched on there, who'd be interested in this guidance, Chris, are members too. They're ultimately who we're aiming to protect, with this guidance. So they too want to know that, the administrators are doing the best they can to protect themselves and their pension benefits. So yeah, something around what the solutions could look like and how to make it, as frictionless as possible. I've said it already today, but this layered approach, I think, is key. So we want to do as many checks as we can on these individuals and have it as smooth for them as possible. So when they're, quickly clicking on their biometric link, taking their selfie and photographing their ID, behind the scenes, we're looking at the credit referencing agencies, we're looking at mortality checks, all at the same time. So the member doesn't need to potentially give us that additional information. We can do all of that while they're, taking their selfie, as I said. So that definitely makes it much easier for the individuals. I also feel today we're all used to now using apps, websites, like clicking on links to do verification. The banks have done it for a long time. So I do think that members will embrace this type of technology. I think maybe some clients or trustees are wary of, taking it a step too far. But we all know now that this is a common form of identity verification. And I think sometimes we do a wee misservice as well to our demographic in the pensions world. A pensioner is not just someone who's 80 or 90. A pensioner can also be 55, just retired and able to use these solutions. So I do think that it's much smoother and it's something that's much more common these days. And I have to say, at Hymans, we haven't seen much pushback at all on use of biometrics. Individuals are keen to use it, or at least give it a go. So I do think it's a much smoother experience that's welcomed by individuals. But also some of the benefits to these types of solutions. It's a one and done in a couple of minutes. So a much more effective process for the member, much quicker. They get their money a lot sooner than normal. But also a big benefit is members no longer need to send us copies of their cherished documents. So sometimes we want to see passports, birth certificates. It could be a marriage certificate in a bereavement case maybe. So being able to do these identity verification checks online and avoid maybe the risk of these treasured documents getting lost in the post is a big benefit for our members. And I mean, it then doesn't take us 10 minutes or 10 days maybe to review the documents and do all the extra checks we used to do behind the scenes. It's all now one and done. But yeah, I think much smoother experience for individuals. However, there will be some that don't want to use the technology, and we fully appreciate that. And although our guidance is looking at some of the more technical solutions, we do need to be mindful that some individuals might not want to. And as long as we have a nice fallback position in place, if need be, that again is as frictionless as we can offer the individual, then again, that's more than welcome. But there are the benefits, as I've just said, to these types of solutions that we want to be sharing with our individual members.
Thank you. And before we get into starting asking some of the questions that our audience are sending in, so thanks to those of you who sent them in, we still have time for some more, so keep going. Are there any misconceptions about identity verification that you'd like to clear up, Lorraine?
Yes, I mean, I think as Gillian said, and I explained at the beginning, because there's so many layers to an identity, and so many things to check, and so many kind of dimensions of identity, really. So the digital, the physical, and the behavioural. I guess there isn't one silver bullet to the one check that you can do, because you have to really manage all of those different layers. And also then check that a confirmed identity could still pose a risk. So, and I think combining with the ever-evolving nature of fraud, there's so many dimensions to consider. So it's not only checking that the identity is real, checking that the individual presenting or claiming to be that verified identity is in fact the rightful owner. This is often called identity authentication. And we've mentioned that technology and AI is making it easier to create fake ID documents. However, the technology is also making it easier and more accurate to check ID documents. With ID document and facial biometrics using, mobile selfies, checks are far more accurate now than a human reviewing a passport document physically. And this is gets really exciting, and this is all available now. So facial biometrics, I guess, used to mean just matching a selfie, but now it can detect if the face is a video, if it's a mask, or if it's AI generated, and it can do this all within seconds. Some of the liveness detection on the checks even check whether there's blood running through the subject if they have a pulse, and it can check documents obviously for tampering and fraud analysis, and even check whether it's seen the same faces before as well. So the technology is AI powered and is learning as well, and the document verification checks go beyond the surface checks, and the AI and the technology can see better than the human eye, I'm afraid.
So just before we go to the audience questions, then just have a little bit of looking ahead. So Gillian, do you see the identity verification evolving over the next few years and the processes you use around them?
Definitely. I mean, Lorraine's just mentioned there some of the sort of ways fraudsters are able to get round the technology, or I know the technology is there to spot these types of things, but it's so sophisticated now and evolving day on day that, yeah, we need to be on top of things as an administrator at a pension market. So yeah, just, I mean, some of the risks we did call out in the guidance document was impersonation fraud, social engineering, synthetic identities, which Lorraine explained up front. But then you've also got the risk of family fraud and internal fraud. So we need to be on top of all of these, but mindful that technology is only as good as it is at the time. Once the fraudsters move on to the next sort of way that they want to attack us, we need to be able to respond. So as I touched on already, I think one challenge we face is the increased number of cyber attacks that we've been seeing recently, with the main aim of getting hold of data. It's not just interruption, that's the cyber side of things, and we could do a whole other session on cyber. But actually to get access to that member data and commit fraud pretending to be that individual, that's a huge risk for us, and in fact for the whole of the UK. It's not just our industry. So that's something that we'll need to be on top of and be mindful of in terms of future identity verification checks. The AI, as well, as Lorraine touched on, I think this is a huge side of the world we'll need to keep a closer eye on. I mean, it's got its benefits, don't get me wrong, but as Lorraine said, fraudsters can create or manipulate documents, you know, like deep fakes on passports. It looks like the real thing, but it's actually been tampered by an AI tool. And the biometric tools that we're using will need to, you know, be able to spot these deep fakes and notice that something's been tampered with. And that's something that I know some of the software providers are already starting to look at already. But also the liveness checks that Lorraine mentioned and being able to mimic the presence of an individual. So Lorraine mentioned the extreme of, you know, blood running through your veins, but actually, you know, sometimes as part of verification at the moment, you're asked to do a liveness check. So things like, you know, smile at the camera, turn left, turn right. That's now moved on. Fraudsters are able to replicate that as part of the identity verification processes. So now, again, some software providers are starting to look at what's called passive liveness. So you don't actually need to move your head, but when you take your selfie photograph, it's able to detect liveness at that same point due to some algorithms, you know, built into the technology. So there's another example of the way that technology is already moving, you know, over the past couple of years. One other challenge I think we'll need to be mindful of, and it's on everyone's tongues just now in the pensions world, is the pensions dashboard. Now we know that PDP have selected their ID provider. They have got multiple security controls in place, you know, on the underlying technology. But what about when a member gets to the administration side and we need to try and identify them? You've got a fuzzy match, then what do you do to make sure you're speaking to the real individual before you share any data? So I think as the dashboard goes live and we start to see real cases coming through, again, that might draw out some of the changes we might need to make to either PDP's identification process or what we do as administrators. And just finally, because I have got a bee in my bonnet about, you know, where we're going to go in the future. I did work in financial services before in the banking and building society world, and we are behind where the banks are. And I understand there's reasons for that, but I do think we will need to try and catch up with the banks sooner rather than later. Because if you think you phone your bank just to change a standing order, you probably get asked 10 security questions before you can actually tell the call operator what it is you want to do. Whereas maybe in the pensions industry, it's not that robust at that sort of interaction, that first interaction with an individual. And as Lorraine touched on, there's maybe aspects of using AI there as well. So voice recognition, for example, Gillian Baker phoned last week. Is it the same Gillian Baker this week? So again, I think loads of opportunities there to use AI proactively instead of just looking at, you know, how it can negatively impact our industry. And just a final thought. Quite timely, I was reading a news article yesterday, and in fact, it was an invite to another webinar. It's actually looking at how fraudsters are now bypassing or able to bypass multi-factor authentication. Now, that seemed to be particularly robust at the moment, but if fraudsters are now able to get around it, and I believe it was called adversary in the middle, that's how it was being referred to, then that's a huge concern for us because we see it as one of the more robust ways of securing data. So yeah, there's a prime example of how things are changing already day on day.
Thank you. And just to finish off before we go to the questions, and Lorraine, anything that you've already hinted about AI tools, anywhere else the tech and data is going to help us?
Yeah, I mean, I think, echoing what Gillian has said there, technology and data is really will play a transformational role in really shaping the future of identity verification for UK pensions industry. Technology is really the backbone of the efforts to combat fraud, help businesses comply with regulations, and importantly, make sure that the user experience is good. And the whole sector is obviously undergoing really rapid digitalization. So really, you know, effective identity verification requires broader, richer data sets to really improve the accuracy and reduce the need to conduct repeated checks. So avoiding passing over, continually, repeatedly passing over, customers passing over PII data, and having the right data points to understand risks at the right moment is critical. So I guess an example of checking a risk could be, it's quite a simple check before transferring any funds or transferring large amounts of money, checking that the bank account the money's being transferred to is real, that it's associated to the right person, checking how recently that bank account was set up. So if it was a bank account that's being a large amount of money is being transferred to it, but it was only actually set up a week ago, and you can do checks to see that, then that is a major red flag. So there are some quite simple checks you can do that help prevent fraud as well. So really, we've talked a lot about biometrics and liveness detection. So, you know, that's a real scalable way that technology can be enhancing secure verification as well. Integration into the pensions dashboard. So why does that matter? Being able to access multiple pension pots through the pensions dashboard program is going to require seamless, strong digital identity verification processes. And then, you know, AI and machine learning to detect and prevent fraud as well. So AI systems now can spot patterns across multiple schemes that indicate synthetic identities, social engineering attempts, or even bot attacks as well. So it's very important to have a shared fraud intelligence network as well. So I think there probably needs to be more of that going on as well. So, you know, providers potentially anonymously sharing flagged identities or suspicious behavior would be really good.
Okay, thank you. Really good breakdown of what's in the guidance. Again, I should urge you all to go and read it. Let's have a quick, some of these questions. Some of these are great. Some of these do veer into the legalities of things. I'm not quite sure we've got the right panel to answer some of the legal aspects, but we'll pick some of those questions up with the working group if we can't answer them today. But let me have a quick look through. So, and some of these questions are from people working in this very solution. But a very short one. I think you've already hinted at this through layering. Isn't biometrics the solution? Question mark. There you go. That's the question. Gillian, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, no problem. My view is no, it's not enough just to do a biometric check. So the biometric check is it's basically identifying the individual so that the person taking the selfie matches the photograph that's on the ID document. But how do you know that that's still Gillian Baker behind the scenes? And that's why I gave the example earlier of, you know, while the member's doing all of this, we're also checking Gillian Baker is the same date of birth that's on the passport, you know, that the person's photographing, is the address that we've got in our back end records matching the person that is trying to identify themselves. So I don't think it's enough. There needs to be additional checks to identify that the person is who they say they are, but as well as, you know, that individual is matching the ID that they've got. I don't know if I explained that very well, but yeah, I think you've got to have the dual support there in your identity verification processes.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Gillian. It's kind of like I said, there's not one silver bullet, and it's interesting. So we have the digital identity and attributes trust framework, which does align with the GPG 45. So GPG 45, Good Practice Guidance 45, is the guidance that the government have issued on how to check an identity. And there's, I can't remember all 5 points, but in terms of checking that the identity is real, it's alive, it's existed over time. So that's doing a check to know whether an identity has existed over time. Could be checking a bureau report to see around longevity of the individual subject. So things like that you can't just get from biometrics. So there are other important checks that need to happen as well. And it comes back to all of those different layers and all the different dimensions of an identity. So the trust framework, which technology providers of identity verification services, it's really important to make sure that you're working with a certified provider. That provider will then be working in accordance with that good practice guidance as well. So to make sure that the identity is real, it's not synthetic, it's existed over time, it's not a dead subject, etc. So to make sure you really do the robust checks. And I think also in terms of is biometrics, should it all just be about that? So I think there's checks that you need to do at different moments in time. So and doing a full facial biometric check might be a bit too unwieldy a process in the customer journey if the customer is doing such, quite a simple transaction, just phoning up and you need to verify who they are. You wouldn't want to put that subject through a full facial biometric check. So it depends on the moment and the why you're having to check the identity and the riskiness of that situation as well, in terms of which check that you might deploy at that time.
Yeah, I think a phrase I first heard when we were doing some of the user testing for dashboards was appropriate friction. So it's always finding that right level, because people don't want a process that's so smooth they end up being worried that it's not safe. Yeah. But equally, you've got to pick the right tools for the right part of the process, haven't you, to make sure that they know there's been a hurdle to get over, they'll feel more comfortable, but it can't be a cliff they've got to climb. Yes, moving on to some, taking some questions in a little bit more detail. So I think it's partly touching on that and something you already said, Gillian. If we're including a digital approach, often with biometrics, is there a good alternative for those who can't do those sorts of journeys?
It's a good question, and it's something we've been certainly deliberating at Hymans. So the approach we take is we will try and explain to an individual the benefits of using the technology. That it's completely safe, that it's quick to use, it's easy to use. We've got demos available or tutorials available, so we will try and ask the member, not obviously twist their arm to say, you must use this, but to convince them there are benefits to using it. Because they might just be a wee bit wary, maybe never used it before. So yeah, we try and speak to the individual and try and get them comfortable with it. But if not, then the fallback we've implemented is back to providing documents. Since COVID though, we've had a secure share file sort of document upload tool available. So individuals don't have to still post documents to us and risk losing them. We have got a secure link where they can take copies and upload them. So again, it's still technology, but it's still a wee bit easier to use than maybe the selfie and the biometric app. And then we'll perform checks off the back of that the documents relate to that individual. We've got other tools at our disposal to check, a passport is valid, etc. So yeah, I mean, if that's what the member wants to do, we're happy to support that. If they're comfortable with that and they feel that's maybe less frictionless than using an app, then we're happy to support that. But yeah, technology-wise, I'm not aware of anything else really that would be an alternative to the biometrics. I don't know, Lorraine, if you've got anything on your radar from LexisNexis perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways to check documents without going through the full kind of facial biometric selfie process. So there you can take photographs of documents or provide numbers, etc. And there's technology that would be verifying that the numbers are in the right sequence. So there's machine readable numbers on a passport, etc. Are they written in the right way, etc. There's technology there to know whether documents have been tampered with, etc. And then there's obviously all the host of other checks that you can do in terms of like the data-led checks as well. So checking against mortality databases, checking against electoral roll. There's some other data sources where you can check so against the National Fraud Initiative, so that's the Cabinet Office data as well. So there's lots of different sources. So I think in the absence of doing kind of full facial biometrics there, you can get deeper into the layers on some of the other data checks as well.
Okay. We're rapidly getting more and more questions in, probably more than I can ask in the time available. I'm going to take chairman's privilege and start grouping some of these together. So it's sort of legal, but it's more around data processing. So quite a few questions here identifying either the challenges of setting this up or how much you need to get the lawyers involved. But basically, it centres on the issue that biometric data is obviously personal data. And it's probably personal data that none of us have ever processed before. So rather than ask all the individual questions, generically, what would you say about the risks that administrators need to think about when they are applying these solutions and the handling of biometric data? Do you want to start from Lexis' point of view, Lorraine, and then we'll go to admin?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would suggest, in terms of when you're working with a technology provider that is doing the biometric solutions for you, make sure that that provider is certified against the UK Trust Framework, because that will have catered for all of the GDPR rules and all of the handling of data. So I think that, you know, that I guess that's the point of having the trust framework there, and the ability for providers to get themselves certified, so that if you're a user of their services, you can be assured that they are complying to the right processes and the right data handling measures as well. So it's each certified provider would go through quite a rigorous audit process, and all of their processes and data things and legal and data handling processes would have been reviewed and audited as well. So I think that's a good checkpoint for providers, for users of the identity checking technology, to be reassured that that's all been taken care of for them.
Yeah, and I totally agree, Lorraine, about due diligence checks on any supplier that you may choose to provide your solution. Make sure they're meeting all the regulations and compliance setup. As Lorraine said, that's definitely a key one. A simple one, though, is to engage your data protection officer. I know at Hymans we engaged our data protection officer a lot in this project up front to make sure he was comfortable with what we were doing. And we also prepared a data protection impact assessment. So we looked at the new processes, the new workflows, the data being shared, especially the sensitive data, and we worked that through with our DPO. But also shared that a version of our DPIA with our clients as well, because the fear factor is out there with biometrics and using, you know, the sensitive data. And indeed, the lawyers of our clients, you know, as well want to be sure that we're handling the data in the right way. So a data protection impact assessment, I think, is a key activity as part of any of this. And privacy notices as well. Make sure that the individuals, when using the technology, are aware of how their data is going to be used, and have that up front and available, and maybe FAQs off the back of that as well, so that each individual knows what they're doing, why they're doing it, how their data is going to be used, and also consider the consent piece. So yeah, totally agree with it, whoever's asking the questions there, Chris. Definitely data protection considerations are a big part of any biometric project.
And in your experience, do you think that's the biggest blocker, the sort of legality of it, rather than the actual technology?
It's definitely an activity on the project plan that can take a while. I'll put it that way, quite diplomatically. But yes, it's a huge part of the project that you need to factor in the time required to engage your clients on that and their lawyers. So yeah, it's a big piece of work, Chris.
Okay, I'll try and pick up the last couple of questions before we wrap up. So hopefully we have find some shorter answers, please. So what should trustees be doing? What should they be learning? What should they be training? James, thank you for your question, James. He has given an example that they're involving trustees in simulated phishing exercises. That's phishing with a PH. Are there any other similar things you could quickly recommend for guiding trustees on what they need to learn?
Well, I know from a personal perspective, Chris, I'm being asked to attend a lot of trustee meetings, to deliver training sessions, where clients and trustees were worried, just say this time last year about their cyber controls. They're now worried about fraud and scams. So I'm doing a lot more trustee sessions to give a bit of comfort of the controls we've got in place at Hymans. So that seems to work well, that face to face with the trustees, sharing with them details of what we've got from a cyber perspective, to protect data, but also then, should there be a breach, what can we do to protect our members? I think that one-to-one sort of session and that sort of straightforward explanation of what we're doing and why can sometimes work. But yeah, we do phishing exercises as well, both internally and can support our clients on that as well. But yeah, I think the trustee and the education piece is a key activity.
Yes. I would agree with that personal touch. We've increased, when I'm not working for PASA, I run a tech business, so we're increasingly going to do education sessions with trustees and scheme management boards about what we do in the nature of the software itself that affects security and those sorts of things. So I think you're right. I think just that more one-to-one connection with trustee boards. I'm going to quickly move on to another question. So vulnerability. So obviously we recognise that aging is one source of vulnerability in our society. So how can you go about detecting and protecting vulnerable customers through some of these tools, Lorraine?
That's a good question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I did touch on vulnerability earlier as one of the key insights I'd picked up from the guidance, and I didn't go into too much detail in that. But yeah, how do you spot someone potentially? And I mean, vulnerability could be going through a divorce, it could be a bereavement, could be you just haven't got the financial education to understand, your retirement pack. But how do you know if someone, is being socially engineered? If a family member is pretending to be that, so it's putting pressure on that individual to maybe transfer their funds or something like that. We have tried to do some of this training at Hymans. It's very difficult, Chris. How do you spot vulnerability? But it's things like it sounds like maybe the member's upset. There's maybe someone talking in the background. They're maybe not understanding what you're saying. It could be they're in tears. They're not understanding what you're saying. They just want their money. So you've got to identify those types of things. But then also notice as well, maybe if it's a fraudster, putting the pressure on, I want my money now, why haven't I got it now? So it's a double-edged sword, I think, identifying genuine members who need some genuine support versus someone maybe pretending to be that individual. Lorraine, I don't know what you would think about the vulnerability side.
Yes, and I agree. There's lots of different ways that somebody could be vulnerable, and certainly it can change over time and change in quite short notice. So, for instance, divorce and bereavement, etc. And individuals handle those in different ways. So and it's quite a sensitive topic as well. So I know that there is a lot of effort looking at how vulnerability flags could be used in some of the data checks. It's something that we don't have right now, but it's definitely a topic that's out there and growing as well. So it's there isn't a kind of a database you can go to check whether somebody is vulnerable or not. Have they self-declared it, or are there more insights, data insights that might show that there could be some vulnerability as well. So it's a tricky one, but something definitely to be mindful of, because obviously the risk is if somebody is vulnerable for whatever reason, then there might be more ability to be able to exploit them through social engineering, etc. as well. So there's a growing romance fraud happening as well, which is particularly difficult because I mentioned earlier around checking whether the bank account was recently set up at the point of transferring. In terms of romance fraud, etc. The fraud has actually happened many months, potentially years in advance. That's when the fraud, the person started to become defrauded in terms of building up. So capturing at the point of when the money transfers across is a little bit kind of trying to shut the door after the horse has bolted, really. So it's a tricky one to manage.
I need to bring this to a close now. I can see there are some questions I haven't got to, so we'll make sure we get those captured, and maybe we'll get the working group to provide some written answers after it and send them out to you. But thank you for your engagement online and sending those questions through. Just to finish off then, one last question. So there's a lot of great stuff in the guidance, but the uninitiated, we talked about layering, there's some new words to learn in there and all sorts of things. So there's a very useful glossary in there as well, but it could look like a lot to do. So just to wrap up, one quick suggestion from both of you, please. What do you think administrators could start with? So not talking about the whole thing they've got to do. What should they do first? Gillian?
For me, the first step would be a short gap analysis, Chris, against what we've got in the guidance. So look at the different life stages we've identified as being the key life stages, have a look at what you've currently got in place, and then just compare that to some of the best practice ideas we've got in the guidance. Now that's all in conjunction with considering your own risk appetite and what you are actually willing to implement. And off the back of that, that will result in a short initial action plan just to get you maybe a bit more focused on what the next steps are. But I think, yeah, it doesn't need to be too in-depth, but just that high-level gap analysis to begin with of what have we got in place, what are the PASA group proposing, and where do we think we've got gaps we need to fill.
Thank you. Lorraine?
Yeah, I would have had that gap analysis as my top one. I think I'd say number 2, engage with certified identity service providers, so ones that are certified under the government trust framework. So start evaluating those providers that offer biometrics checks, document scanning, integration with pensions platforms, and to echo what Gillian said, consider kind of pilots and phase rollouts, particularly focusing on the high-risk transactions like transfers.
Thank you. And just the last point from me, first thing I would do is read the guidance. It is excellent. Do feedback on the guidance. So we've got some of your questions from today's session, so we'll get those answered. After you've read the guidance, please do feedback and tell us where else you want guidance on this. This is a new area for PASA, new guidance we've issued. As some of you have raised in your questions, everything's changing, the threats are changing, the solutions are changing. So this guidance will change too. So please let us know what you want to see next from us. So just leaves for me, thanks to the whole working group. Thanks to Lorraine and Gillian for representing them today on this excellent webinar. And we look forward to seeing you again. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thanks.